Tennessee basketball is going to its second Elite Eight in program history. This time, it's an 82-75 win over Creighton that lifts the Vols into Elite Eight territory. I'm Ryan Sylvia. This is Noah Taylor. We're with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network. Let's start with kind of a question that I talked about my key takeaways over at VolReport.com, but is that the biggest win in Tennessee program history?
Yeah, it's got to be up there. I mean, Elite Eights obviously have been hard to come by. You've only, made two in your history, and now here you are, and you got to feel pretty good about the chance for that first Final Four. Obviously, a familiar team standing in the way. I know we'll get to Purdue here in just a minute. It'll be a lot of talk of Purdue over the next 24 hours. But a big win for Tennessee, and just the way that they did it, obviously, is as dominating of a run as I've ever seen out of this team, covering a Rick Barnes team, coming out there, going on that 23 run, kind of putting the game, I wouldn't say away, because obviously Creighton kind of makes it a game there, but there's no doubt that changed the trajectory of this game. Looked like it was going to go back and forth there early in the second half. And then, now here you are, exactly what, we said at the beginning of the year, what we thought where this team would end up. And so far we're right. We thought the Elite Eight would be it. And they got to feel pretty good about possibly getting further.
Yeah, it's for sure a top two win in program history in a sport that's dominated by what are you going to do for me in March? Well, Tennessee's now won this game twice in their program history, so it's up there. It's up there with that game back in 2010 against Ohio State. You take your choice. I'll take this one as the biggest win at this point, though, just because you're a 2 seed. You realistically feel like you have a good shot to beat Purdue. In that 2010 campaign, you're a 6 seed, so you kind of are that Cinderella in a way. Obviously not complete underdog like those mid-majors, but no one really expected you to get to the Elite Eight. This year, you're expected to do it, and you should feel pretty good about being able to get to a Final Four. So just kind of looking ahead at what's on the horizon, I think you could definitely make an argument that this is the biggest win. You touched on that 18-0 second half run. I mean, just how big is it that you're able to not only get stops on the defensive end, but have that translate to fast break points and kind of open this thing up, and what was ultimately the difference?
Yeah, I mean, we saw how high this team's ceiling could be during that stretch. I mean, you're doing both. The defense is getting stops. It's disrupting shots for Creighton, who's a really good shooting team, and creating opportunities on the other end for you. And obviously we know that we've seen Tennessee play that way, that really high level at times this year. But they did it on the biggest stage to this point, and it won them the game. It allowed you to hold off Creighton because you were able to build a pretty, sizable lead there. I think the biggest thing too is coming off of that Texas performance. Yeah. The way that they shot in that game, you're able to win in spite of that. Obviously, you're able to win because your defense was really good in that game too. Tonight, you get the best of both worlds, and I think that's kind of the performance. You talk about biggest wins in program history. Certainly one of the biggest under Barnes, because that kind of performance has been what's missing in March. Yeah, the defense is good, but can you do enough offensively to win a game? And they did both tonight.
Now, Tennessee does all of this without a starter. Santiago Vescovi, a fifth-year guard, a big piece of what Tennessee does. He hasn't been as efficient as a scorer this year, but he stepped it up a lot on the defensive end, and he opens things up with his threat of shooting. He's not here, dealing with the flu day-to-day. We'll see if he's able to give it a go against Purdue in the Elite Eight. Jemai Mashack steps into the starting lineup, gets into a little bit of foul trouble and has to sit, but comes back in a big way in the second half, and I think really was a key piece of this win. What did you think of Jemai Mashack stepping into that role? Really didn't look like he thought of it any differently than when he's off the bench.
Yeah, it kind of, when you find out at the beginning of the game, what you're going to use, that Santiago Vescovi's, likely not going to play, and then finding out that he's not going to play, you kind of look at, the balance there. You know what you're going to get out of Jemai Mashack. You're going to get elite defense. And you're going to get elite defense out of Santi. So you knew that wasn't going to be that much of a drop-off there. And, I wouldn't say anything. He did surprise us, I guess, defensively. What you're going to get out of him as a defender. And I think he ended up with 4 points, but man, he made some big baskets in that game as part of that run. He was on the court there, finished with a high plus-minus, can't remember what I think 12 is what it ended up being. So I think what he did on both ends was super valuable to this team, and a guy that was just in the right spots at the right time. And it's got to feel really good for Tennessee if you go into that Purdue game here on Sunday and you're not able to run with Vescovi again. You got to feel good about where you're at. And I think, too, some of the other guys that had to step up while Jemai was out with the foul trouble, Jordan Gainey made a couple big plays defensively, too. Got a block there, hit a couple shots. Cameron Carr didn't get a lot of minutes, but, came in when both of them were in foul trouble, and he hit a big three, and I think got a defensive rebound, too. So I think it was really good to see all those guys, but obviously what Jemai did in that starting role was very important tonight.
We'll look at the stat line really quick. 2 for 5 from the field. He finishes with 4 points, like you said. 8 rebounds, 4 fouls. You don't love that, but aggressive on defense, it's gonna happen. And then 2 assists, 2 blocks, and 2 steals. So an all-around great game from Josiah Machak. I asked Creighton head coach Greg McDermott after the game kind of what makes him so effective even if he's not scoring in bunches. And he quickly pointed out, hey, during that 18-0 run, some of those offensive rebounds were from Josiah Machak being in a good position. You look at his stat line, I mentioned the 8 rebounds, 5 of them are on the offensive end. So he's big in creating those second chance opportunities. And you ask Josiah-Jordan James, I asked him a similar question. What did you think of Josiah Machak tonight? How big was it that he was able to step into Vescovi's role? And he looks to his right and he says, well, these 2 guys, Zakai Ziegler, Josiah Machak, they're the best 2 defenders in the country at their position. So I'll transition that into Zakai Ziegler. How big was what he gave Tennessee tonight? Obviously, Dalton Connects, your leading scorer with 24 points, but Zakai, he drops 18, and he's always going to get his assists, 6 assists, only 1 turnover, and he even grabs 4 rebounds.
Yeah, that's the recipe. Because I mean, if you're able to get what Dalton gives you, if you're able to get, and then Josiah obviously I think got 17, and then Zakai, it begins and ends with him. Rodney Terry last week with the great quote about him being the head of the snake. The guy that kind of gets this thing going, and he did that tonight on both ends. But I mean, this game couldn't have come at a better time. For Tennessee, can they get past that Sweet 16? I don't know if I'd call it a curse, but past that threshold that you've been to, you've knocked on the door a couple times. Can you get past it? Well, this is the kind of game coming off that Texas game. Would they really follow that up with another bad offensive performance tonight? They didn't, and obviously Zakai was a big part of that with what he was able to do offensively.
All right, Tennessee is headed to the Elite 8. We'll stay here in Detroit. We'll have coverage tomorrow as we talk with Rick Barnes and players and preview that matchup against Purdue, and who is likely to be consecutive National Player of the Year in Zach Edey, and how Tennessee plans on stopping him. We just saw a failed effort at kind of containing him by Gonzaga, and Tennessee's going to have to figure it out if they want to advance to their first ever Final Four. So make sure you head over to VolReport.com for our coverage on that. Baseball as well. Drop game, one of their series against Georgia, will have coverage as they try to win these last 2, claim 2 straight SEC home series, and then football as well. Spring practice just got the first kind of period of practices out of the way, finished it up with a scrimmage, and then pro day as well. We have content on everything UT Athletics over at VolReport.com. Links to everything you need is in the description. Thank you for watching.